Hello everyone and welcome back to Let's Talk FGO Wanted, the show where we let you know if you want to roll that 5-star. Saber Medusa, Saber Medusa. That's it, send tweet. Okay, to do the real intro, Wanted is a show where we talk about a servant's real life history, their fate lore, their mechanics, and more. And I'm your grandpa today, so pray for me. It's like 3 memes in the intro. Anyway, let's begin. And despite having only been recording for like 30 seconds, there's already like 4 project files open on Audacity. Anyway, we're talking about history first. If you are part of my typical audience, you're probably familiar with some version of the Medusa myth, but we'll hit the highlights, since Medusa has never had a 5-star version before. Continue to pray for Summer Medusa. So, Medusa also could be written as more Medusa, with a long OU sound, meaning guardian. Also sometimes just called Gorgo or Gorgon. This is a thing also that fate didn't make up. Sometimes the Greeks just did that. Anyway, she's one of the 3 Gorgon sisters, the others being Stheno, whose name means forceful, and Eurale, whose name means far-roaming. They are usually said to be the daughters of Phorcys, or Phorcys, and Keto, primordial sea deities, known for creating many monsters. This also means that the Gorgons are the sisters of the Graeae, or Grey Sisters, who were the ladies who shared 1 eye and 1 tooth. That'll come up later, trust me. So, the exact location of where the 3 Gorgon sisters are living depends on the telling. Usually, it can be somewhere in Anatolia. It was supposed to be, like, off the shores of Kistani, which is a town in ancient Aeolus. But some sources had her as being from Libya originally, North Africa. Herodotus, for instance, suggested that Medusa actually came from the Berber religion. There's a lost play that has them living on the shores of a lake in the far west of North Africa, so more like Algeria or Morocco. Another source places them on a rocky island which is called Sarpedon, which is in quote-unquote Okeanos, which could mean anything from the Atlantic Ocean to any of the seas which surrounded ancient Greece, such as, I don't know, the Caspian Sea, the Black Sea, the Red Sea, Persian Gulf type shit. So, The poet Pindar says that Perseus visited the Hyperboreans, the giants who live in the north, when looking for Medusa. But this does not necessarily imply that the Gorgons were in the north, just that that's a place that Perseus checked. Keep your pins in that one. Now, the name Gorgon, which usually is considered to mean grim or fierce, might be etymologically linked to things like growl or gag. Gorgon, kind of like a sound. Sometimes it really is that simple. But that can refer to Medusa specifically, all 3 sisters, or another entity who is their progenitor. Sometimes they're like, no. The 3 Gorgon sisters are the daughter of the monster called Gorgon. But they're usually all described as having wings, all described as having snakes for hair, terrible eyes, grim or fierce, implying, a terrible gaze to behold. Usually only Medusa causes petrification if you look at her, but Apollodorus attributes to all 3 sisters. Some other sources, have various numbers of sisters causing the petrification. Also, again, sources don't agree on the mechanics. You would think I just described that, usually the sisters are described as having, terrible eyes to behold, so it's like, if they see you, you turn to stone. But no, it's usually more like you see them. Sometimes they're considered to be so hideous they turn you to stone kind of a thing. Maybe it's shared eye contact, I don't know. But another common factor that will come up is that usually of the 3, Medusa is the only one said to be mortal. They should all be immortal primordial deities, but Medusa is seen as being mortal. Depictions of Gorgons in art usually follow a format similar to what is called the Gorgoneon. So you've got a monstrous face which is said to ward off evil, resembling a mask. The Gorgoneon itself is like a recurring art theme. It's kind of like a gargoyle, and in fact, I'd have to double-check my etymology, because I didn't want to get into gargoyles today, but that has a similar number of G's, so it could be linked or it could be nothing. But the idea is that you put a big scary face over your door or your temple or whatever, and, other scary things are like, oh shit, it's already scary in here. Older sources usually describe Medusa as being so hideous you turn to stone. This isn't universal. As early as 490 BCE, the previously mentioned poet Pindar described her as fair-cheeked Medusa. This is a euphemism for beautiful. I know you people at home are going to think differently of that one, but I think it's your face cheeks. Her face was good to look at, which is, the horrible irony of it, you turn to stone. The description I've usually seen in the myths of Perseus is snakes for hair, golden wings, claws, fangs, eyes which turn you to stone if you meet them. If you meet Medusa's gaze, you are turned to stone, sort of a thing. Gorgon blood is described as a powerful medicine in several myths, usually related to Asclepius, and all of the Gorgons are said to have a fierce cry or shout as well. Their speaking is supposed to make men's hearts quake, sort of a thing. The shield of Heracles, described in some poets, depicts all three of them chasing Perseus, crying, and it is said that the shield itself would ring with their cry to scare people. Also note that Gorgon blood thing. I will mention this a little later, but for instance, one of our big sources, Homer, does not name-check Medusa by name. He does reference a Gorgon or the Gorgons when talking about things like the Aegis and the like. So, again, the kind of like Gorgon-Medusa conflation comes up a lot. Medusa's the only Gorgon we remember. Isn't it sad? Eurale, exactly. Stheno knows what she did. But yes, the only Gorgon I know for sure whose blood we've extracted is Medusa's, but again, the myths are like, oh, the Gorgon blood. So Perseus is his own deal, and for all I know, they will eventually scratch that guy off the data mine list sometime in the next, year or two, however they're going to do it with the time they got. But he's his own thing. He has his own long myth chain to get through, so we're just going to hop in for him when he intersects Medusa. What you need to know is that Perseus, demigod, son of Zeus, there's a prophecy. Him and his mom, get hucked into the ocean. He washes ashore. He's living his best life. Except he did a typical Greek hero thing. He made a rash promise, specifically to King Polydectes, to get any gift he named, because he forgot to get him a gift for his birthday party. Polydectes names the heads of Medusa because he's trying to kill Perseus to bang Perseus' mom. It's that simple. So Perseus, who knows this task is impossible, but he's going to do it anyway because he did say anything, he prays to the gods. Zeus is his dad, so he answers by sending Athena and Hermes to bless him. Hermes gives Perseus his own winged sandals. He gives him the curved sword, harp, or harpe, and he gives him old Uncle Hades' cap of invisibility. Athena lends Perseus a polished shield, a sack to hold the head, so you don't get to keep looking at it, and also tells him how to find the Gorgons by hitting up the Grey Eye. So, in the myths, Perseus travels to their island, and he follows the rules and wins the day. He uses the shield and its reflection to see his way forward and walks backwards into the cave, so he's holding up the shield looking into the mirror. That counts for anti-petrification. Also, definitely why there's a mirror shield in Zelda. He has his strike guided by Athena to decapitate the sleeping Medusa. He bags up the head, and he uses the cap of invisibility to evade the other two sisters who, try and kill him, and flies off. After some other stuff, Perseus gives the head to Athena to place upon her shield. This becomes part of her Aegis. This can mean both a shield and a coat of mail, kind of like goat skin worn as protective clothing, but often, considered like an armor. This links back to the Gorgonian theme, which is a form of protective magic, so, probably a myth to explain why people use that as an art theme if the Gorgons are supposed to be so terrible. Perseus does petrify a few people, though. He petrifies King Atlas, who's not the same as the god, usually. This creates the Atlas Mountains in North Africa, and he does get Polydectes, because Polydectes is a dumbass and is like, well, I want to see that you've got the head, and Perseus is like, okay, stone. Now, some stuff happened, though. From Medusa's severed head sprouts the winged horse god Pegasus, who helps out heroes like Perseus and Bellerophon, and the sword-wielding giant Chrysaor, who is the father of the three-headed giant Geryon, and in some tellings, he is the father of Echidna, mother of monsters, which puts Medusa in quite a powerhouse of a monster lineage. Also, in some versions, while he's flying away, in the North Africa type stuff, it's said that Medusa's blood drips down on the ground and creates a race of toxic snakes, which later gets an Argonaut. Red coral is also sometimes thought to be related to petrified Gorgon blood. Now, if you're more passingly familiar with this myth, you may have noticed some factors are missing. The oldest versions of Perseus and Medusa, the Gorgon sisters just kind of exist. They and lots of other kind of like monstrous deities, clearly children of the gods, but also not super friendly with humans, are just kind of chilling. And it's Polydectes who specifically picks out Medusa as an impossible task. But if you may have heard some other impressions about this myth, I gotta tell you, guess what, everybody? Put a nickel in the jar. It's Ovid's fault. You see, Ovid's metamorphosis adds a fresh layer to a lot of Greek myths very late in the timeline. Ovid was a Roman poet from, the early imperial period. And he did this mostly because he had very specific bones to pick with the Roman ruling class. I don't want to say I disagree with his politics, but Ovid does often fuck up discussions of myths and mythologies because he pops in at the end there and adds a lot of stuff that everybody nowadays remembers, and, you kind of take it for granted as like, oh, that's the real version. No, that's the version where Ovid, was making his art political. So that's a valid reading, but it's not the, canon or true reading. I did some scare quotes there that you can't see. Now, Ovid's version does have Medusa as a beautiful woman, though again, he's not the origin of the gorgeous Gorgon trope. She has sex with Neptune in Minerva's temple as revenge, since Minerva can't really do anything about Neptune. Minerva causes Medusa to turn men to stone when they look at her and have snakes for hair, and that's it. A lot of later writers, thinkers, and psychologists tend to interpret this as SA, but Ovid was less clear on that. So again, there's a lot of people take a lot of interpretation from the thing about Medusa. And to be fair, in the original myths, she is kind of just minding her own business. Kind of a tangential thing going on there that Perseus gets looped into. But also, Perseus isn't really doing it for personal glory. It's the guy who's trying to bang his mom is trying to kill him. Anyway, Medusa is both a monster and a beauty, is a pretty strong image and trope. It's survived the Greeks and Romans to modern culture. Medusa in her head was a pretty common art theme in the Renaissance. I've pulled some public domain images that I've showed as the bed image here. Depictions of her have been used as the cover of various mythology textbooks and reference books, like Bulfinch's Mythology, if you've ever heard of it. And trying to explain how many times she appears in popular culture would be an exercise in futility, because I wouldn't get them all. She's been an ever-loving fuck-ton of it. I'm not sure why exactly it's so sticky, but humans really like this story. Like I said earlier, I think it may be that kind of dramatic irony interplay of oh, she's hot, but if you look at her, you fucking die. Oh no, what will you do? That, and there's a lot of open-endedness to the mythos. Now, if you're at all familiar with Medusa and Fate, and if you're not, buckle up for my batch of bullet points at the end here, you can probably see which myths and artistic depictions Fate borrows from more heavily and which less so. Medusa, as she appears in Fate, is depicted as an attractive young woman. She has long hair like snakes, which she seems to be able to do cool hair tricks with. Sometimes she manifests chains from her hair. And her petrification, of course, comes from a Nasuverse classic, high-level mystic eyes of petrification. They are considered to be jewel rank, so they're a relic from the Age of Gods. So, Nasu makes it much more about deliberately the terrible eyes and the eye contact thing. She keeps them sealed with one of her noble phantasms, Breaker Gorgon, which is her blindfold that you see Medusa often wearing, or just wears mystic eye killer glasses. Now, the story of Medusa's relayed in Fate leaves out their direct relation to Phorcys and Keto, instead has the trio of Gorgon sisters as earth goddesses who just kind of manifest directly from the land by the human belief in perfect idols of worship, that is, immortal goddesses. Medusa, however, was inherently flawed somehow in her creation, and despite being the youngest, was not immortal, which also in Nasu's context began to age. This causes the three sisters to diverge into unique individuals, kind of. This is as good excuse as any to mention, and fix the fact that we talk a lot about the Gorgon sisters as a triplicate, but we don't really give Steno or Ural anything to do in myths. They just kind of exist at the beginning and end sort of thing. Anyway, the worship humans have for them draws the ire of the Olympians. Medusa was cursed to have the love or faith for her turned into hate, so she was seen as a monster. It would make sense if this also added the petrification, but I think the text is implying that her mystic eyes and kind of her combat aptitudes naturally evolved to protect her sisters, since Medusa herself is not an immortal perfected goddess. The implication is that she starts to develop, her own unique capabilities because she is not immortal, but her sisters are kind of stuck being, thems forever, unable to evolve, as it were. Anyway, the sisters flee to what is fairly consistently referred to in Fate as the Shapeless Isle, which is a great way to integrate myths which can't decide where the fuck the Gorgons live. They're just Shapeless Isle in the Okeanos. Where's that? Don't know, don't care. Now, I had an interesting block of bullet points here. This is where we get some interesting discrepancy between the older lore and some of the newer implications, specifically with Saber Medusa. In the translations of Hollow Ataraxia I've got, Medusa implies that it was either Athena or Poseidon's wife. I see both terms used, but they are definitely not the same, and there's definitely no way that current Fate would fuck that up. Who cursed her? Poseidon is kind of treated like Medusa's, first boyfriend, maybe a little bit of a sugar daddy. Gave her Pegasus as a gift, Chrysaor as their child together. On the other hand, Saber Medusa has dialogue for Canis, who is a great example of Poseidon's own personal track record of dumbass god antics, kind of commiserating on their dislike of Poseidon, though Medusa is still wary of Athena-flavored servants. Is it because Saber Medusa is supposed to be at a different age point as well? I hope that we can get a more integrated clarification when they do release the Hollow Ataraxia remaster script. That's supposed to be coming this year, I think, still sometime. And obviously, I do want to say that as a fan disc, Hollow Ataraxia is probably not currently meant to be like the end-all be-all of canon. They wrote it because the original Fate Stay Night was super successful, so they were like, oh, well, we'll give you some extra shit as thanks. Obviously, since they are planning on remastering and re-releasing it, that will probably be more meaningful as, like, Fate as a franchise. And of course, this could just be a kind of a shift in the writing over time, or a repositioning of the writing relative to FGO. Plenty of characters are, while not characterized different, have different POVs because of Fate Grand Order than their original other Fate media. In FGO, Poseidon is a villain at worst and just kind of a hapless bozo at best. He got bested by Francis Drake twice. And in some of our scenarios and stories, Athena's straight up the player's ally. And FGO doesn't make much mention of any of her incidents cursing mortals, which a lot of which was, again, Ovid. Athena's usually a pretty chill deity. She has, a couple of big fights, but a lot of the big thinkers were very fond of her, so she usually gets portrayed as, pretty middle of the road. So I don't know, how we want to spin that. They might be, like, thinking that spinning to the audience where, like I said, Athena is technically someone who helped us through some previous areas, like in Lost Belt 5, that, outright trying to villainize her with Medusa's backstory doesn't work as well. I don't know. Also, it's probably too late for this retcon, but I think it would benefit her kind of Chaos Mode characterization. There are some versions I saw where it's Aphrodite who curses the Gorgon sister to turn people stone because, dumbass humans go around saying they're prettier than she is. This would be perfectly consistent for where we're at with characters in Fate, but I think we're way too late to make that change now. I'm just letting you know that, there's realms of possibilities here. Regardless of the middle bit, the ending is the same. Since Steno and Eurali are still perfect goddesses, humans come to the Shapeless Isle to defeat the monster, Medusa, and steal them back, and so Medusa starts to kill humans. Her sisters warn her not to enjoy doing it, but eventually she kind of becomes drawn into the satisfaction of killing mortals, and she slowly transforms from a goddess into an anti-hero, and then into a monster. But not a beast. I don't think we've ever tried to spin that one. Eventually, she tires even of protecting her sisters and devours them, also becoming a truly eldritch monstrosity before Perseus kills her because he's been armed with the exact noble phantasms to do so. Again, the original text seems to imply that Perseus is just kind of like bumbled his way into this. He thought he could do it, and he wasn't sure, but he was gifted the exact circumstances to do it, so it all kind of worked out. We'll see again if that ever sorts of manifests. Also, the Eldritch thing, like, they keep doing that, but also they keep not doing it. Only shows up in Gorgon's NP for a limited time, because that would make characterizing her as a mountain of tentacles or mountain of snakes, hard. Anyway. Even in Fate, from Medusa's body springs the Pegasus, which is a noble phantasm she can summon with the Bellerophon, the bridle, which is named after the hero who tamed the Pegasus. Again, allegedly, the Pegasus in this context is not her child, but is a gift from Poseidon. Pegasus is a divine beast because he is a horse god, after all. That's, again, he's not just a winged horse. He's also technically a god. And also from her body springs the mysterious golden giant, Chrysaor. Literally, he who has the golden sword. Fate gets some more fun of the ambiguity here. Chrysaor's appearance is unclear in real life. I think we have exactly one pediment, one stone figure at the Temple of Artemis in Corfu, which shows him next to Medusa. So it shows a, Gorgonian-type depiction of Medusa, and there's just a little guy next to her who's supposed to be him. So Fate acknowledges that nobody knows what, quote-unquote, he looks like. In the myths, Chrysaor mates with the Oceanid nymph Karohi? Not really sure how to handle the RH into the OE there. But their union produces for sure the three-headed giant Geryon, and in some tellings, which is the one that Fate is using, Echidna, the mother of monsters. Chrysaor is the name of Gorgon's, aka Avenger Medusa's, Bond CE, and shows what looks like a distinctly feminine silhouette inside a giant golden egg. The sword that Saber Medusa wield is dubbed Chrysaor after that figure, but may not be that exact sword. Even Medusa is unclear. When she uses her NP, Saber Medusa, Chrysaor doesn't appear himself. The figure you see in her NP is the three-headed or three-bodied giant Geryon, who was defeated by Heracles for the 10th labor. And also remember, Heracles is sometimes given a shield which bears the image of the three Gorgons. Also, technically completely unrelated, but this also means Saber Medusa has some fun interactions with Britomart, because she's technically Britomart 2. Chrysaor is the name of her father, Artagal's sword. It's cute. Anyway, all that means that, canonically, to Fate, Medusa is Echidna's grandmother, Typhon is her grandson-in-law, and the likes of the Orthrus, the Kerberos, the Hydras, the Chimeras, the Nemean Lion, the Earth Dragon Ladon, the Dracons of Kolkis, the eagle that eats Prometheus' liver, and possibly the Scylla are all her descendants. I told you. Big money monster lineage. And this link is made manifest in Saber Medusa's NP and abilities. She can summon demonic beasts to her aid, because that's how it's supposed to all work. Also, I do think that, though, that this is a little funny because Saber Medusa is supposed to be a bit younger than Rider Medusa, but older than Lancer Medusa, basically as Medusa begins aging, so she's not quite her mature anti-hero self, and definitely not her most mature monster self, but is also no longer her young, most goddess-like self. It's funny that way. Now, Saber Medusa notes that she has some influence of Athena on her, and like her profile translations and stuff. This makes her personality baseline a little bit more distant and goddess-like, and influence some of her aesthetics, but the game still says that her higher ascensions are still pretty close to Medusa's default personality. I don't want to say Medusa's usually kind of like tsundere, but she's definitely like cool, professional, and distant, unless you like genuinely engage with her, then she gets more open and attached. And if you'll allow me to carry Fate's water for a second here, the connection between Medusa and Athena, I can bridge this gap very easily in my mind. Medusa's very name means guardian, and while obviously she is a famous monster, I did mention that in the original myths, she's kind of minding her own business until Perseus gets pulled into it by a motherfucker. I don't know why King Polydictus was like, yes, the Medusa head. Go get that. It's probably because he heard about it and was like, Perseus will definitely die. He's going to have to look at her and turn to stone, or he'll get eaten, or whatever. But, since it's just kind of his bum fate to do it, and also because of nepotism, Perseus gets armed with the tools to overcome this task in return, because he does have a prophecy he's got to fulfill later. He does some tangential heroism on the way, like rescuing Andromeda and stuff. But by doing all this process, Perseus, eventually returns Medusa's head to Athena as a votive offering. This transforms Medusa's figure from kind of a monster to be feared to an icon of protection. And also, to talk about Fate's themes a little, to say the quiet part out loud, the Aegis becomes an immortal symbol. Sometimes a very blinged out and celebrated symbol. There are some descriptions of, the Gorgon's head on the shield with great golden tassels and stuff. And the Aegis, again, which, depending on the text, either means a kind of armor, literally a goat skin, but, could be interpreted as armor, or a shield, is worn by either Athena or Zeus, who are both very major gods in the Greek pantheon. The phrase being under someone's aegis is meant to mean being under their protection, and the aegis is directly connected to the Gorgon or to Medusa. So, it's just one of those things where, like, because Fate gets to be funny with the Throne of Heroes and kind of take snapshots of characters in their entirety, including shit that hasn't even happened yet in our current timeline, taking influence from Extra, which is still set in the 2030s, which aren't here yet, damn it. The kind of, like, transformation of Medusa as a figure who both represented, kind of protective magic, and also obviously a lot of the modern reinterpretations of her as more of an anti-hero, or even straight up a heroine, kind of, rolls back into the Throne recordings. Now, like I mentioned before, Medusa's an OG. She is the classical rider of Fate's Stay Night. She has decent coverage on all the original routes. Sometimes even feels like she's, her own little bonus heroine there. Also, hey, if you're not caught up on Fate's Stay Night and you're this deep in FGO with talking about a serpent pairing an event that's going to require the 6th Lost Belt cleared, I'm sorry? Hey, did you know you can get Fate's Stay Night Remastered on Steam now? I should get an affiliate link for that. Anyway, Medusa appears in basically all the spin-off and sequel materials to Fate's Stay Night. She's in Holorexia, like I mentioned. She's in Unlimited Codes. She's in the Tiger Coliseum stuff. She's in Skits and Carnival Phantasm. Granny Bike! She's in Today's Menu. Like I said before, she's basically sometimes treated as a bonus heroine. She's been utilized in a number of Type Moon's classical, famous April Fool's jokes, such as, being the super heavyweight wrestler Masque de Gorgon in the Fate Wrestling Federation, etc., etc., etc. Medusa has big reps. Honestly, I feel like she's repped a little less because FGO is out and has become a little bit more focus of the franchise, but obviously she's still big and classical. Medusa's a playable character in Extella and Extella Link, the Muso-type games, which means she has her own short story mode you should check out. Very funny. And also, honestly, Medusa's appeared a lot in FGO. Never having a big role as herself, but she's a frequent cameo character in events. At least once a year, she shows up in some context in Guda Guda, almost always. I think there's been a Guda Guda basically every year. They may have missed 1 year overall, calendar year-wise. And she's almost always on a Guda Guda CE, no matter what. And obviously, FGO has a cavalcade of her alternates appear. Not only are her sisters Steno and Eurale playable units, which is a first, arguably in a normal Holy Grail war, definitely wouldn't be servants at all, but there's the young Lancer-class Medusa, Medusiana or just Anna, and also her older, more monstrous form as the Avenger, known as Gorgon, both in the 7th Singularity Babylonia, and in the First Order anime, there's the altered Lancer version of her. I also want to do note, obviously, since, this is her first 5-star appearance, Medusa hasn't gotten a full-blown wanted before. Gorgon is probably the closest to the actual, classical mythological descriptions of the Medusa. Again, not getting into the Eldritch Mountain of snake tentacles. But Gorgon's various ascensions have the golden wings, the brassy claws and fangs, the snakes for hair and about her waist. She has a snake tail, for instance. And she's, physically the largest and most bountiful. Did you remember I said that Medusa was originally an earth goddess in this continuity? Anyway, to round this out, Saber Medusa appears as a major character in Ordeal Call 1 Paper Moon and is being introduced as summonable in the upcoming event, Mystic Eyes Symphonie. And who baby, humdinger over length, and we've only just started mechanics. But we're starting mechanics, so this Medusa is a 5-star Saber. She is more slanted towards higher attack, lower HP, but she's not at either extremity. She is, however, the first Saber, I believe, to have a triple quick Arts Buster deck, and she's got old school mid to low hit counts and turbo high NP gain. This is like the 8th year of FGO this content was put out in, and she's got 1.14% NP gain on 4 hit quick cards, by the way. Funny how that math works. So her Noble Phantasm is a single target quick with 9 hits. It does bonus damage to the human attribute and also gives all Earth attribute allies 20% attack up for 3 turns. This is not other, so it's herself. It has a 40% chance to petrify enemies, which is mostly a unique stun for Medusa faces or Medusa-type units. The overcharge effect is just quick up for 1 turn first. Starts at, 10% and then scales up to about 30. Now our first skill is the old standby. It's Breaker Gorgon. This is a 100% petrify chance for a single enemy. Gives Medusa 30 to 50% crit up on quick cards exactly for 3 turns, though obviously since she has 3 quick, that's going to be everywhere. But also has an on-attack buff on quick cards to give enemies hit with them 500 curse damage for 5 turns, so a little bit of dots in there. Her second skill is a 30-50% battery on herself. It comes with a 10 to 20% attack up for the party for 3, so it's a charisma, and further gives allies with the demonic traits 20 to 30% crit up for 3. Note that this is not Medusa and her relatives. They are not the demonic type, at least not in most of the trait lists I saw. And our third skill is a crazy defense. It's a 3-3 invul, so 3 hits, 3 turns of invincible, a 3 times 3 turns of debuff immune, and also gives Medusa 10 to 30% critical resistance for 3 turns. Real good. All this on a 6-turn cooldown minimum. Her passives are her classic Magic Resistance A for all-around debuff resist, her Riding A, so those quick cards hit like a truck, and Divinity D-, so not her E- as a rider, but D-. It's only like 120 damage plus, but it can help for certain content. So while, the regular Medusa was a bit of a budget sweeper, she was very good at killing doors back in the day, especially once they gave her her battery. Saber takes some more notes from her Lancer self. She's here to kill bosses. She's got 2 very robust stuns. Obviously has a skill that works as an oh shit button, but is separate from the stun resistance strat. You just gotta worry about their normal immunity or resistance to debuffs. She does bonus damage versus man. Man is not the, most common attribute, but it is an attribute that exists, so you can plan around it. She has a scaling steroid with overcharge. If she gets to loop her NP, which is not too insane given how high her NP gain is, like I said, it's a 9 hitter, and she's got real high NP gain. It should be possible in some contexts. But that means that she can stack herself quite an impressive 40% attack up. Obviously, she charismas and then gives everybody 20%. She herself is Earth, unless she's Heaven, and I missed that part. Pretty sure it's Earth, though. Yeah, I had to pause the recording for a second to peer at my own graphic. You can see it on the screen, obviously. So yeah, no, that should be pretty good attack up. Her crit stuff is a little low, but given her deck and the revamped way that Quick works, they, fixed Quick to give you free crit chance on a chain, or on a starting with Quick, in addition to increased star gen. And obviously, proper quick chains give you free stars. But, 50% extra damage on what might be free crits, given how often you're likely to use a quick card or a quick chain, nothing to sneeze at. And of course, obviously, since you are using her as a single target, probably for high HP bosses for story or challenge content, her defenses are immaculate. 3-3 invul and 3-3 debuff immune with a 6-turn cooldown, plus she's got stuns, and that's pretty good. Also, honestly, Sabers don't really have a lot of units like this. Her primary competition in slot and card type is going to be like Okita and Saber Astolfo. Those guys don't really do like a specific damage niche. Astolfo feels kind of like oddly enough, a stun player. Like the main thing is you do NP seal and you have access to a Terrify. And Okita's thing is just one turn of really, really high burst damage. And most of your quick 4-star Sabers are focused on what I would call a sort of quote-unquote anti-asshole strategy. I guess you would call that like control-type stuff, because they use things like Sure Hit, Pierce Defense, Remove Guts, or just like if you have a Saber Deermid, for instance, he just straight up moves defensive buffs in general. None of them get Medusa's trait-type damage, so if you were going quick, there's not a lot of other Sabers which do quite what she does. Now, if Medusa's going to be your DPS focus here, what are we doing? Sadly, there's no Sabers who do quick support as such. You're going to have to pair her with the classics. Scotty gives very focused quick buffs. She has a great battery. She can reduce enemies' defense and crit chance, so that's a pretty solid hookup, set up for your big plays. Her summer variant also has some great quick buffs, but does kind of split her attention with Buster, and Saber Medusa doesn't really benefit from that. She has a single Buster card, so obviously, you can make that hit pretty hard, but it would mean that there may be turns where you're just not seeing the benefit of Summer Scotty's Buster buffs. Also, Kabahime also suffers a little bit from this, but because she started as a quick support unit, she still has a pretty great pick, because not only does she give card buffs, but she can add overcharge, she has some defensive buffs, and since one thing I will note is that Saber Medusa can't really get around hard defenses herself, also Kabahime has a buff strip, so that can really help you out there. And if you're looking for sweepers who can kill ads while offering support, there's a couple of Berserkers that are really good for this. Sendo Riku has some great team and targeted buffs for quick and associated things like Critical Up. And upcoming unit, Lohi, is another quick Berserker who has team-wide synergy. So you should be able to get, sweepers who do AoE damage, clear ads, maybe break some weak break bars, and set up for your main damage dealer to hit pretty hard. For CEs, Medusa has got a 50% battery, so you can do any 50% charge CE. But battery is also something a lot of quick support servants do, so you could zero it out and just do other stuff. She has okay HP, so you might be okay with her defenses going for like a Black Grail, but I would recommend, in general, probably quick up and NP up at the front, crit at the back. Like I said, she can do some crit stuff, but not really on her own as much. 50% over 3 turns on just her quick cards is a nice spicy bonus. But just generally improving her quick card effectiveness is going to give you a lot of rewards. And like I said, you're single targeting, so you can't go wrong with NP up if you want to kill guys. I did mention that she herself doesn't pierce. If you're an OG player, Decapitating Bunny is a classic. That's quick up plus pierce invul all the time. That's pretty old school. You may want to look for other similar CEs. They've put out several CEs that just give you piercing invincible all the time now. And especially with future Grand Saber rules coming into play, Medusa's Saber's Bond CE is pretty decent. Gives the whole party, including herself, 10% quick up all the time, and then 15% NP damage up if they're Earth. Just little extra math that helps her out. And now for my famed other stuff. Medusa's Ascensions are pretty easy. Your newest material in there are 12 Divine Spiritrons, aka God Balls, which are like 3 years old at this stage? That shouldn't be too bad. That's not a huge number. No, the bad news is her skills. To max those out, which again, you've got a 50% battery, you've got pretty decently spaced cooldowns, so you're going to want to go that far. They're going to require 72 of the brand new Vestiges from Ordeal Call 1 each, so that's going to be, I guess, an incentive for you to clear those free quests. Now, unlike some other SSRs coming out recently, our girl here has quite a few raid-ups. She's appearing, obviously, in Mystic Eye Symphony. She's going to return alongside Durga for Ordeal Call 2's pre-release early next year. She is featured on the raid-up for the My Little Dragon event in about 2 years, though obviously there'll be a new servant there. But also, she is a Saber, so she's been rated up this year in JP alone in both the Saber Weekly and the Grand Dual Saber campaigns. Yay! And as a new limited SSR, she should be somewhere in all future GSSR campaigns. Now, that's all I got. I'm going to wish you a pleasant evening. You wish me good luck rolling, and we're going to be going on. Also, cross-promotional shout-out. Check out Medusa's voice actress, Yu Asakawa. She's online. She streams on Twitch sometimes. She tweets about love and deep space. She's got a fairly good grasp of English. Don't tell her I sent you, though. I may have to kill you in Minecraft. Also, the song I used is Six Gun Gorgon Dynamo by the Darkest of Hillside Thickets. Check that shit out. I'll link it in the end card. Love those guys. But that means it's time to do our usual outro biddies. If you're watching this video on YouTube, give us a like. Leave your comments down below. Hit us up on our Discord. We've got a rolling channel. You can put all your rolls there and discuss FGO and other stuff. If you're new here, sub to the channel. Throw us a sub. Throw us a bell ring. Consider joining the channel memberships to support us. Helps us out making out these videos, especially one like this, which is quite bountiful. And of course, special shout out to our patrons. I'll name them in the outro card, but they're really helpful, and they allow you to get access to this video early, before it goes up for public, and access a lot of other cool stuff. And obviously, be sure to check out our podcast, Let's Talk FGO, on this channel. Check out our podcast feed. We talk about FGO basically every week. And a couple of weeks ago, I had a pre-game, which was a breakdown of the upcoming event, if you're interested in that. All right, let's play the outro music cue, and then the patron slide. And before we go, let's shout out all of our patrons, but especially Adam DeHarp, Lexo G, Call Me Zed, Carlos, Dragon, JW9000, Chris Starlight, Legendary Boss Hunter, Rise of Kenji, Rogue Robin, Sharvor, and Varian the Crow. Thank you very much for your support, everybody. If you want to see us do more, consider supporting on Patreon. See you next video.